So good for cool. So thank you everyone for joining us today for our Adaptation for Communities lunchtime learning session. So what we do with these sessions is we'll be recording these and uploading them to our YouTube channel, and also posting up a blog on our website, which will have all the sort of helpful links and information that's shared today. Today we are focusing on our buildings, so adapting our buildings and homes for climate change. And we're joined by our two speakers. We've got Fiona from Stirling City Heritage Trust and also Frank from Southwest Stirling Climate Action Network. So really excited to hear from them. Again, just to say, I'm Steffi and Isabella's here as well. We're going to be helping facilitate the event today. So feel free to put anything in the chat. These sessions are part of an ongoing climate leadership program, which is designed to share practical skills, leadership skills, and also some place-based learning and inspiration. So hopefully you feel, those three key areas are explored through the program as a whole. I'm going to pop a link as well to our Eventbrite page, which has lots of lovely things coming up. So please take a look at that as well. So without ado and noise pollution from the office, I'll move on to Fiona, who's going to take us away first. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm hoping my screen will share. Can everybody see that okay?
Posted. I'll have a little chat. Yeah, it's just loading up.
Oh, you're seeing the wrong sides. One moment.
Okay.
Sorry. Now is that sharing the right screen?
Yeah,
Can
that
you...
looks good to me,
Okay.
for sure. Thank you.
No, that's great. Now please let me know if I'm running over time or if I'm yapping on about the wrong things.
We'll give you a heads up. I'm sure you'll be fine.
Thank you. So yes, thank you very much. My name's Fiona Park. I'm the Climate Action Project Officer for Stirling City Heritage Trust, and FEL have very kindly asked me to chat to you about adapting homes and buildings for a changing climate. Just a little bit about what we do at the Trust. We're one of 7 charities across Scotland. We are currently funded by Stirling Council and Historic Environment Scotland, and the kind of goal is to encourage and promote the protection of the historic architectural and landscape heritage within the Stirling Council area. So we do this through our outreach, our grant support, and our traditional buildings health scheme. Now, this started in 2013, and basically our building inspectors will provide impartial advice and go out using a drone to inspect the building fabric of our members' properties. Now, we usually only focus on properties within the Stirling city boundary, Bridgevallon, Blairlogie, and Dunblane. And we only do traditional properties, which is pre-1919, according to Historic Environment Scotland. So in 2022, we started our TVHC retrofit service, which was initially funded by the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and awarded by Stirling Council and Historic Environment Scotland, and it was to promote a fabric first energy efficiency assessment of traditional properties in Stirling. It included an energy performance certificate, which was unbiased. So it was a bit different to how you might see it if you were buying a property. And then we also provide tailored advice and a bespoke report for what to do for your building. The reason that we did this was because we were wanting to try and help traditional properties to become ready for net zero and also take on a more realistic approach to net zero because some of the things that like external wall insulation aren't always suitable. So we would also provide advice on that and also on statutory consents. So back onto the topic, climate change is a serious global issue that is negatively affecting all of our properties. With the higher temperatures and higher intensive solar radiation is leading to scorched masonry and uncomfortable temperatures for occupants. It's becoming more popular for properties in Scotland to install air conditioning and new builds or retrofit cooling methods to improve upon the thermal comfort. Our buildings are also exposed to more frequent and intense rainfall, resulting in saturated masonry and leaks within the property. Now, in Scotland, we are kind of well known for having kind of smaller depths of gutters, whereas down south, they have larger depths of gutters, and that's kind of classed as a retrofit in traditional buildings if you were to do that. There's also wetter winters and increased wind speeds, which are resulting in damaged building fabric. This damage can also create the perfect environment for vegetation to grow in unwanted places, like here, or in hard-to-reach areas like gutters. All of these issues create serious issues to occupants' health and well-being due to the accelerated decay of their property. Properties exposed to water ingress and unplanned air infiltration are harder to heat, leading to higher energy use and energy bills. This is why it's important to realise that the first steps to adapting your property to climate change is to keep the property dry. So, first steps, fabric first approach. This is to treat the building to make sure that it is wind and water tight. And many or most owners do not realise that there is an issue until it physically presents itself internally. For example, if there's a leak in the ceiling. It's important to encourage property owners to maintain and monitor their buildings. For example, if you have a slate roof or a roof, like a tiled roof in general, some contractors offer an MOT, which is where they inspect the condition of the roof coverings and provide small repairs and other services such as bird proofing and ventilation. Other important areas are to always check any chimneys attached to the property or neighbouring chimneys to ensure that they are structurally sound and prevent unnecessary damage. If you're repairing a traditional property, for example, a sandstone property with a slate roof, you must ensure that appropriate materials are used. Avoid using cement products or expanding foams, as these are difficult to reverse and can be damaging to the historic fabric. It is also important to ensure that all areas are looked after and to ensure that they remain wind and water tight. So ensure you clean your gutters. When maintaining and repairing your property, there may be an opportunity to also adapt to the building fabric to withstand the changing climate. Here are a few examples. This photograph has additional lead applied to the underside of the slate and over the downpipe hopper to protect the timber fascia, which was suffering from water damage, which you can see here. Stirling City Centre had severe flash flooding last year, which led to excessive water running down from the castle, down the steep hills and directly into the shops, causing closures. One way to reduce water ingress into the shops was to install flood doors or flood barriers, which can fit into this wee section here, and it only comes up to about here. There's also an opportunity to install clay or tiled shop fronts to protect any timber or metal window frames. This is another great example, and it's also a case study that I'll also focus on later on. But it's actually a before and after photo of a traditional property that had a cement render that had bossed, and they went through a repair grant to get a natural lime harl installed. This can also help waterproof and windproof the property. And if you have exposed brick walls or anything, you can have in modern buildings, you can apply a rough cast. And this can prevent moisture deterioration to the building fabric. Once the property is wind and watertight, you can then add additional climate adaptations to your property. For example, adding a chimney cowl, which is in this section here, can prevent birds nesting and reduce rainfall and drafts through the flue. Installing a chimney balloon or a chimney sheet can also reduce drafts from the chimney flue, from the fireplace, sorry. But I always encourage that you always regularly, annually or biannually get a chimney sweep to ensure that the condition of the flue is sufficient. Another alternative is to replace open fireplaces with an appropriate stove, such as biomass. This can reduce drafts and also provide a sustainable secondary heat source to a room. Other fabrics can also apply to, excuse me, can also apply to insulation. Now, you have your kind of main area, which is your loft space, and most properties are usually fitted with some form of insulation, but sometimes it's maybe not as thick as what what the current recommendation is, which is a minimum thickness of 270 millimetres. When applying additional insulation, it's recommended to always apply on top of the existing insulation as it can encourage the sorry, as insulation can be a skin irritant. Um, this is a great example of one of our projects where the property had installed insulation to one half of the roof rafters and not the other. And the issue was that the property owners were having an issue with the heat escaping faster. And this was where the heat was escaping to. So applying insulation here prevented additional or slowed the amount of heat that transferred through the roof space. I'll just move, oh, sorry. Another adaptation is to windows and doors, which tend to be the most draftiest areas of the house. Applying weather stripping or draft proofing strips to windows and doors can significantly reduce the drafts through the frames. Now, it's hard to kind of get a picture of draft proofing, but it's just this thin strip here which you can apply in a suitable colour to match the finish. This photo here is not the best, and I'm not describing the shoe choice, but it's a great opportunity for draft proofing a door. So here was an issue where the door was scraping along the tiles whenever they applied the draft proofing strip at the bottom. So they employed a contractor and a joiner who created a little kind of mechanism where when the door closes, it pushes a little button in the corner here and it actually drops the draft strip from this section of the door. Other options, other than draft exclusion, is secondary glazing or double glazing or vacuum insulated glazing. Now, in traditional properties, many will have single glaze windows, so it's important to understand that this is a great part of the character of the building, but requires a lot of extra heating because a lot of it is escaping through the window glass. So this one here is a compression fit secondary glazing system, but there are also options where you can have a magnetic fit system or the kind of traditional fixed system, which is almost like a secondary window fitted onto the inside of the window ingress. Double glazing is also an option, but one that's kind of popular for historic buildings and traditional properties is the vacuum insulated glazing. Now this is it's similar to double glazing, but instead of being gas, it's actually vacuum sealed, and it can have better properties than just as good or better than triple glazing with a very, very thin frame. I also recommend that your property is at least has have a thermostat, a programmer, and a thermostatic radiator valves, also known as TRVs. If your heating system has a hot water cylinder, it's also recommended to have a thermostat. Being able to control when the heating is turned on or off can significantly reduce energy wastage. Thermostats can control the temperature, and it is recommended to set the temperature to the lowest comfortable for the occupants, which for most people is between 18 and 21 degrees Celsius. This can change depending on the room use, activities, occupant age, health, and other factors. TRVs, which is this one here, allow occupants to manually control the flow of hot water through each radiator. The valve senses the room temperature and adjusts an internal valve automatically. And when the room reaches the set temperature, the valve will partially close to reduce the hot water flow, and vice versa when it cools. It is also recommended to set each TRV to the lowest setting that keeps the room comfortable to save energy. Always remember to ensure that the frost setting is set in each room that is not used if you're not turning your heating on in those rooms. It is not recommended to install a TRV in the same room as the thermostat or any covered radiators, as it can skew the set temperature of the thermostat. There are also programmable or smart TRVs that can be programmed with time control to reduce energy wastage and also allow you to adapt to your own personal use of the building. This product here, which is attached to a roof, is a weather compensator, which automatically measures the outside temperature and adjusts the boiler thermostat temperature as needed. And this allows the boiler to keep running efficiently as the weather becomes colder or warmer. If you are undergoing large renovation works, it may also be an opportunity to replace any radiators with underfloor heating. This is usually associated with solid floors and can be a hot water system or electric. It also allows for the heating system to operate at lower temperatures compared to radiators. There's also an advantage of an even distribution across the floor, eliminating cold spots and creating a more comfortable environment. If you have a gas boiler, it may be possible to retrofit a micro-combined heat and power system, which is generally considered more efficient than gas boilers due to their ability to generate both heat and electricity from a single unit. There are also other alternatives to gas boilers using renewable energies, like solar panels or thermal systems, which reduce the energy supplied by the fossil-fueled heat source in the electrical grid. Although Scotland's electrical grid is largely supplied throughout the year from renewable energies. Excuse me. If you live in a rural area, a micro wind turbine may be an economical measure that can be installed to your property to reduce the load of the electricity grid. And then another kind of grant-funded, government grant-aided, should I say, option can be air and ground source heat pumps. And this can help the government meet net zero targets. When installing renewable energy systems, I would always recommend looking at your local planning, your local authority's property development rights before installing. Please don't just take your contractor's advice, as they may not understand the local council's rights. If you are unclear or you live in a listed building or a property within a conservation area, always send an email to the local council planning department for further advice. Now on to a few case studies that we recently provided, grant-aided works. So this project is still currently ongoing. It's actually just kind of finished in a way, but the property underwent a large renovation in the 80s and then in the early 2000s, where a cement render was applied to the sandstone masonry. The cement is a poor choice of material for the traditional building, as it can trap moisture behind the rough cast and cause accelerated decay to the sandstone. The property was also suffering from internal damp on the gable wall, where the cement was starting to detach from the wall. So the property owners decided to use the health check to access a grant to apply for a lime harl. Now, the property owners were in the high energy category according to Ofgem, and they were off grid, so they were using an oil boiler, or LPG, should I say. So they took the opportunity of the Traditional Buildings Health Check grant to provide 50% of the grant works up to a certain amount. This was a rare opportunity for Stirling as most properties have exposed masonry. During the initial planning, an insulated lime harrow was considered, but due to the depth allowance of the coins provided, it was not appropriate as the character of the building would be changed. Therefore, using a natural lime harrow was used. Once the property received Litta's building consent, works went underway and it even provided a CPD learning opportunity for the Heritage Trust staffs. This project has not only been completed, has only recently been completed, so the data on heating has not been collected yet and is still ongoing. But the owners were delighted, and personally, I think it looks great without the cement. Another project where we took a fabric first approach was the roof and chimney repair. Now, this property was suffering from moisture ingress due to the slip slates and damaged cappings and flashings. The property was not listed or within a conservation area, therefore they um, could, excuse me, they could reinstate the chimney pot, which was removed here. They also had an issue with the gutters where the original cast iron had a few sections replaced with UPVC and the joins were all leaking. So the Trust provided a grant to overhaul the slate roof and replace the ridge cappings and flashings, and the owner took the opportunity of the scaffold to restore the cast iron gutter, removing all the UPVC. Due to the bird's nest on the chimney, it was vital that the work started outside of nesting seasons. This allowed the contractor to reinstate the chimney pots. This is classed as a Conservation 1, as it had a positive impact on the character of the building. So another case study is when the property is wind and water tight. You then have a great opportunity to install further energy efficient measures. One of the largest areas of heat loss in traditional properties is through the single glazed windows. One health check member was suffering from drafts in their home and constantly had the heating on. This made them a high energy user as their boiler could not reach the thermostatic temperature. So the Trust provided grant-aided works to repair the original timber windows and take the opportunity to install draft proofing and secondary glazing. Now, this product is a company through in Edinburgh called Gecko Glazing, where they have a patent design for a low-cost compression-fit glazing system. It is fully reversible and does not require any fixtures into the timber as it just sits in the pane. As you can kind of see here, it's very difficult to notice unless you're up close. The thermographic image on the top is showing the difference of the original window itself, where there's no secondary glazing fitted, and the window where there is secondary glazing fitted. It's quite impressive, and the homeowners immediately noticed the reduction in drafts and the thermostatic temperature of their boiler could be met, meaning that very little energy was wasted, and naturally the energy bills went down as well. Another energy efficient measure for windows is called vacuum insulated glazing. This is a type of glass that consists of two or more glass panes separated by a narrow vacuum gap. The gap is evacuated, creating a vacuum that minimises the heat transfer through the glass and acts as an insulator, improving the thermal performance of the building. It can be equal or exceed the thermal efficiency of triple glazing with less weight and bulk. When up close, you can see small black dots, as you may be able to see in this bottom image. But when standing back, further back, you cannot see it, and it's just a clear window. And if you look at the thermal imaging at the top, you can see that the before and after image of the glazing. This was fitted by the local contractor who took the opportunity to become accredited by the manufacturer. And with our funding, this was a great opportunity to create a green skilled job. And on to our final case study. This was our largest and definitely the most scariest grant aided project. The homeowner had suffered a really uncomfortable winter, and the new boiler was just not generating enough heat to each room, and it was costing a fortune in their energy bills. It was the one and only one so far where they decided to install underfloor insulation. The property had received an inspection by the Trust and it was found to be in great condition with no evidence of damp or water ingress. The homeowners had moved in less than a year prior and were undertaking large renovation works anyway, so they wanted to take the opportunity of the floorboards being raised for the new heating system to be installed to install the insulation. The contractor was able to lift a small amount of floorboards throughout the property and install sheet wool insulation using the crawl space in the solemn. This prevented excessive damage to the original floorboards, but it was still a large disruption for the household, so they moved out for 1 week. It was a challenging project for both the owners and the trust, but once the flooring was reinstated and the data was collected, it showed immediate results. When the boiler is not on, the ambient temperature before the installation was sitting at approximately 14 degrees Celsius, but after the insulation was fitted, it was sitting at 17. So the 3 degree difference allowed the boiler to work efficiently and the energy bills to reduce significantly. And then these are just a few links that are great for any energy advice or any works you would like to do on traditional buildings. So hopefully that's in time, hopefully.
That's perfect. Thanks so much, Fiona. Thank you for so much information there.
Sorry, it's a lot
No,
of information.
it is,
Sorry.
but it's a really helpful reference that we can go back to in the case studies and a lot of rich variety in the things that you've done to buildings as well, and a lot of solutions, which feels very positive
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Um, so we were going to move on to our next speaker first, Frank, and then we'll have some Q&As at the very end, if that's okay with everyone, just to make sure speakers get time to chat. So next we're talking with Frank from Southwest Stirling Climate Action Network. I'm going to post a link in our chat first to the Eventbrite I mentioned earlier, but I'll also be posting up Frank's retrofitting report that will be referenced throughout so that you get a chance to click in and look at it while we're chatting as well, if you'd like to. Does that feel okay, Frank? Are you happy
Yep,
to take
ideal.
us
Thanks very
away?
much. Yep. So thanks very much, everyone. Great to have a chance to chat to you all today. Uh, Only vaguely nervous in recognizing that one of my fellow members, best ever as can, is also on the chat and probably knows more about this topic than I do. But Kate, I'm sure you won't ask any difficult questions, so we'll be okay. South Australian Climate Action Network, comparatively recently formed, started this year, and really it's just recognizing that across the rural Southwest Stirling and the different villages of the catchment, lots of us are trying to work on climate or sustainability actions, but if we can share that knowledge, share ideas, promote each other's initiatives, collaborate on actions, we can achieve much, much more. And in some cases, be an advocate for what has to happen, pressurizing local authorities and others to make the changes needed. So, hugely interesting talk, Fiona, really, really useful to see that the idea that listed buildings or conservation villages mean you can't do things is just one of those myths around this whole area. You can do things, it's just working out what you do and how you do it and take that fabric first approach. We've got a good relationship with the University of Stirling, with the postgrad team up there in social entrepreneurship. So they did a retrofit survey earlier this year, taking in communities in Strathblane, Killearn, Balfron, Kippen, Clivey, Drimnagh, and Strathard, looking at attitudes, or awareness of, and attitudes towards retrofit. we wanted to understand. It's one of those terms that gets bandied around, but do people understand what it means? Do people understand what's involved? What are the realities? What are the myths? So we're trying to tease some of that out, and it was really, really helpful to get the academic rigor of postgrad students doing that, and it also gave it an objectivity that we might have found more difficult. We had about 130, 134 responses across the area, which is, we'd love to have had more, but that's still quite a good representative sample in terms of getting people to respond. One of the things that we do recognize is there will be a level of self-select bias. So the people who respond to a survey about energy retrofit are the people who are interested about energy retrofit. So we have to take that into account when we're looking at next steps or interpreting the results. However, it was clear there was a real interest in it. There are people want to do it to reduce their energy bills. They want to do it to address environmental concerns. They want to do it to create warmer homes. Those are the three key things that people are driven by. And I think looking at what other people have found in other surveys and other types of community engagement, those are fairly universal concerns that people want to do. There is no doubt, and Fiona referenced a couple of times this concept of a fabric first approach. If we can get the building right, if we can get that envelope right, you have a healthier, happier home that costs you less to heat, and then you can look at low carbon or zero carbon heating methods and move that forward. But what were some of the things that they found out? Financial constraints are a barrier. So one of the challenges or opportunities for Southwest Stirling villages is we've a much higher proportion of owner occupiers. So people who actually own their own houses and are making realistic commercial investment decisions about whether or not they spend money on retrofit or spend money on tackling environmental concerns. There are still financial support packages that they can access, but they're less clear and they're less obvious, and we need to do more to promote those, to highlight those, to help people understand what they can do. There's a real concern about finding trustworthy information on retrofit options, and that I think is again quite common throughout this space. For a range of reasons, Home Energy Scotland and other key players aren't able to recommend particular suppliers. So that means it's still a bit of a minefield out there. And that also leads to the next point about a lack of trust. 31% of people were concerned about the quality of work. People, even if they haven't directly experienced a negative impact, know someone who has. It's always that kind of, well, my hairdresser's sister-in-law or whatever else. And there are some real horror stories out there. The challenge has been that increasingly UK and Scottish governments have promoted silver bullet solutions, so cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, condensing boilers, air source heat pumps. So single bullet, let's everyone do this, it will solve things out. And it's not a fabric first, it's not a whole building solution. And what happens is when there's grant money available for that, people who aren't necessarily skilled or trained in it, and again, good to hear Fiona talk about companies that they were partnering with, who were using this as a chance to upskill and to gain credibility and accreditation from suppliers. But there are still too many people out there who are just grabbing hold of the grants, doing shoddy work, and the householder gets left worse off than before with a damp problem or with some other unsaleable house, some other challenge, and still not any better off. So there's that community understanding of, well, what is energy efficiency? What are the retrofit measures? In our particular area, it was probably lower than national average. And we'll need to try and tease out why that was and what that means and what we can do to address those knowledge gaps. And certainly there were misconceptions or concerns about older homes. A number of the villages are conservation villages. So even if your individual building isn't listed, there are constraints over what you can do in putting in place retrofit measures. And again, really, really good advice from Fiona about the need to engage with your local authority, to engage. We don't have the benefit of someone like Stirling City Heritage who've got that little focus and expertise, but a really useful set. I've screenshotted Fiona's last slide to get the list of other people who might have advice, because we think advice is going to be absolutely critical on this. We are concerned about one of the things that we're in the middle of doing our local place plan. One of the things we're identifying to Stirling Council is the advice that they give on retrofitting conservation listed buildings has to be a lot better. They've taken kind of the easy way at the moment of saying, have you thought about thicker curtains or shutters on windows? And we just heard we're going to go through a range of glazing options that are available. It doesn't just have to be shutters and windows. We absolutely support the idea of preserving our heritage, preserving our historic buildings, but we don't want to safeguard the buildings at the expense of safeguarding people or safeguarding the planet. So we need to work with heritage experts who can understand and explain to us what we can do and how we can go forward on it. Again, possibly linked to this knowledge gap, we found in the survey that 48% of people were unwilling to install heat pumps. And yet that's the flavour of this year that the Scottish Government is driving forward. I think a lot of that is because, again, if you don't do a fabric first approach, if you don't lock out drafts and damp from your house, heat pumps are going to be straining away furiously, but not actually achieving particular results. So we need to get that overall envelope, the energy efficiency improvement against doors, windows, all the areas that heat is lost from. And then you can look at a heat pump that will operate at a lower cost and also be a lower carbon approach. And that prevalence of older hard street homes in conservation village presenting a unique challenge. But I think it was, it was great to follow on from Fiona today, because rather than me going first and saying, here's all the challenges and what are we going to do? We've heard what we can do. What we now have to do is find ways in which homeowners in some of the further flung villages in the council area can access that advice, can understand what we do and how we move forward. Oops. One of the things that we're thinking about in terms of moving forward, and again, great if when we come to the conversation, if people have ideas or thoughts or questions, we'll try and answer them. In places like South Glasgow, where you've got Local Home, or Aberdeen, where you've got Nesbit, increasingly communities are banding together to create what's called a retrofit hub. And those bring together surveying capacity and capability with contractors who've got the knowledge and confidence, and householders and owners who want to actually move forward. If you can bring all those together in a community interest company or a co-op or some other investment vehicle, you can work together to reduce fuel poverty, to achieve the environmental benefits of transition to low carbon heating and hot water, to help people living in those homes have healthier, happier lives. I mean, at the end of the day, while I passionately believe we all want to have a transition to low carbon, that shouldn't be at the expense of people's health, and it shouldn't be at the expense of people's budgets. We should help that for them. Sharing that knowledge and expertise across communities, again, going back to the challenges we found, that people weren't sure what to do and weren't sure where to go to advice. It's not particular rocket science. So I would ask all of you to think, when you need a plumber or when you need an electrician, one of the things you're likely to do is go on to your village or community Facebook group and say, can anyone recommend? And you suddenly get these people coming back saying, I use so and he's great. And we need to develop that sort of capacity, ideally through our retrofit hub, but that sort of capacity in our communities, because then you get two wins. First of all, you've got a confidence factor for people who are commissioning work. But secondly, you've got a contractor who's really committed to doing a good job of keeping the standards up, because they know if they get it wrong, then an accurate reflection of the errors they made will be shared with all potential customers that they're not going to get in the future. So it's in their interest to get it right. And if we can create that virtuous circle, then you can actually achieve what is in effect community well building. And again, Fiona referenced the idea of green skill jobs. I think this is really important. If we look at the expectations that are being set by UK and by Scottish Government in terms of the transition to low carbon, in terms of the improvements in energy efficiency that all homes have to achieve by a certain date, we know there's a massive amount of work that needs to be done. There's more work that needs to be done than there are people who are capable of doing it at this stage. So if we can create these community retrofit hubs, we can hopefully give that business to local contractors, and the local contractors will be confident in getting that business, and therefore they'll take on local apprentices. And we can work with Forth Valley College, City Glasgow College, on training people up and getting those skills and create that virtuous circle. So that's certainly our aspiration, is as we move through the different stages of development, to keep engaging with communities, to keep understanding what their challenges and issues are, to improve their knowledge and awareness. and at the right time move towards a retrofit hub that can actually commission and deliver the works and get the benefits to people involved. And this isn't entirely on the script, so it's not Steffi's fault or Isabel's fault, but one of the things we also need to do is lobby government to get its act together and sort out what it needs to do. There are some challenges. So it's great, and thank you very much to everyone who's come along today or to people who are watching this on YouTube later. It's great that you're taking an interest. It's great that you're wanting to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, there are some things that we need UK and Scottish government to do. Otherwise, our efforts are going to be significantly suboptimal. One of the things we need to recognise is that the EPC was a good starting point, and it's a reasonable tool in terms of selling a house, but it's not fit for purpose for a reliable retrofit survey. We need to get a suitable product in place there that actually doesn't work on ticking boxes, but actually has a holistic look on at the whole fabric of the house and all the things you can do, and works out what's right for that property. It doesn't mean that every property is going to be unique and different. One of the things that we're hoping for is, as we engage with the villages, there will be pockets of houses of the same type and age across each village. So you can still get economies of scale, you can still get recycle lessons learned and knowledge, but you have to reflect the individuality of each house in the first place. We need clarity and commitment to the targets and timeframes that are being set out. So one of the challenges at the moment is we're seeing, certainly down in Westminster, and who knows what will happen after the Holyrood election next year, but we're seeing governments rolling back green targets, rolling back sustainability targets because they're a bit awkward. If you're a homeowner and you're being asked to put your own money into a project, you need to be confident that the target you're trying to align to is valid and consistent. We need to decouple gas and electricity prices. So Scotland's in this surreal situation where we've got increasing levels of renewable energy, which should be at a lower cost. But because the current pricing structure couples gas prices and electricity prices, we don't see any fall no matter how much renewable energy we use. And we need to allow community generated electricity to be sold directly to members of that community. My understanding, and again, there's people in this chat who know much more than me about this, but my understanding is at the moment that's not legal. So even if you're in a rural village and you've got your own renewables, you have to sell that into SSE or into Scottish Power, and then individual households have to buy it back from them. I think we need to have localized energy networks, facilitate development of localized microgrids. It'll help transition to net zero. It'll help because if we all get air source heat pumps and all get EV vehicles, then realistically the current grid won't be able to supply that. So microgrids are going to give us far greater resilience and sustainability. And that's my last slide. So a bit of a whistle stop. So apologies for that, but I was conscious. What I'm really interested in doing is hearing what everyone else thinks, and answering any questions people have. So I'll hand back to Steffi. I'm really happy to take any questions or thoughts from people, and chat to Fiona and understand where we're. It is really. I think it's a really good pairing that FEL delivered today. So you someone who's passionate about conservation and historic properties, and someone who's passionate about sustainability and zero carbon, and we're not actually on opposite sides. We're achieving the same thing, working together. It's how we tap into that knowledge and how we move that forward. But I'll shut up now until I answer questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Frank, and thanks so much for sharing. And yeah, I did also feel like it was a nice compliment. I'm always quite interested in that sort of community mass participation in those sort of retrofitting scenarios and things. But as you've highlighted, Frank, thank you for your expertise and wisdom in those ways of thinking as well. It's true that there are other things that need to be done to get that impact and that community benefit. And that makes it tricky for parties like a climate action hub and things to sort of promote this with our communities, with all those sort of different barriers in mind, all the time wanting people to make these changes. And yeah, but appreciate there's a bigger picture work that needs to be done. Would anyone like to kick off with any questions? I don't want to talk over anyone on the call who has something they'd like to kick some discussion off with.
I could maybe ask a question if I may.
Sure, go for it.
So, yeah, I'd be interested to hear thoughts on keeping buildings cool as summer heat waves become more frequent and intense. Um, so yeah, I think it's yeah, we can see examples of design of buildings and yeah, kind of potential retrofit measures, which are used, say, in the south of Europe, which we maybe aren't so used to here. And the risk is that people aren't aware of these and end up installing sort of AC or air-to-air heat pumps, which are also cooling, and we end up using a lot of energy to cool buildings, whereas there may be opportunities to do more with sort of passive cooling. So I think yeah, the obvious things would be shading of windows, things like that, having adequate ventilation, which is yeah, kind of the sort of flip side of the keeping things airtight. So yeah, sorry, babbling on here, but just if the speakers have any experience of these kind of discussions around cooling as well as keeping buildings warm. Thanks.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's something that we're increasingly going to see a focus on. Um, I'll let Fiona come in on this if there's anything specific, but my anticipation is actually some of our older buildings are going to be better at keeping their cool because you had smaller windows, because you had thicker walls. So they're got it sussed, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The challenge is going to be some of our more modern buildings where the thermal envelope is really, really strong. Uh, I lived in a lovely house built about 5 years ago, and we got this triple height picture window, which is lovely. We're really fortunate; it faces northwest, so we're not going to get massively overheated. But at the front of the house, we know that if we don't shut blinds early doors in the summer, the whole house just heats up beyond anything that is comfortable. So you're absolutely right. We do need to look more at passive measures, better shade. One of the challenges in many parts of the world where they look at better shade, you end up with roof overhangs designed to provide that shade. When you couple that with Owen or Flores or wherever else, what you end up with are roofs being ripped off across Scotland. So there's a balance to be found there in terms of how you provide that extra shade. I think also though, and I wouldn't dismiss convection systems and air source heat pumps. I think if we crack renewable energy so that there's less harm being done by electricity consumption, then I think there's a role for um, us to use the potential of air source heat pumps in a way that isn't happening at the moment. My understanding is, and again, I don't have a high level expertise in this, but my understanding is that the uh, availability of funding for air source heat pumps will not stretch to or allow air source heat pumps that can also be used as air conditioning units. So the unit we have in our house is by a company called Daikin, who did a lot of work in Australia with units that are heating in summer, or heating in winter, cooling in summer. But in the UK, those sorts of units don't attract the grants or don't tick the boxes that we're looking at. So I do think there's a need to get smart about um, how we insulate our homes against heat as well as against cold. But Fiona, what do you think?
You're spot on. Traditional buildings definitely lead the way for passive ventilation. And I think with modern buildings, it is the issue of kind of, I don't want to say over insulating because if we're getting colder in winters and such, then you definitely need the insulation. But in terms of uh, traditional properties, we very rarely have members who come to us with issues with cooling. And if they do have issues with cooling, it's usually the modern.
I've lost the sound
With,
for
with
you. Sorry, Fiona, just the last bit there.
Sorry, I
That's it.
forgot to flip my speaker down. But no, passive ventilation is important for traditional buildings. For kind of modern buildings, I believe that they are looking into kind of ventilation and how that kind of impacts the heating and cooling of the building. And to be honest, heat pumps are not my expertise at all. And when we're working with traditional properties, most of them are not actually suitable for being solely supplied by heat pumps. So they have either a hybrid system where they have the gas as well as the air source, or I believe some heat pumps can now work with some solar panels as well. So that's maybe a way we can counteract, but again, not my, my area of expertise. But in terms of ventilation or cooling, sorry, I think one of the biggest things I would say is kind of the behavioural changes. Now, the difference of closing blinds during the day, for all it feels wrong to be shutting out the light that you have, actually does make a big impact um, on the property and keeping it cooler. So,
Thank you.
I,
Yeah,
th I
great.
think also just referencing on the slides you did at the start, there's two aspects to the heat concern. One is the ambient temperature and what it's like to actually the livability of the properties. And again, we've covered
yeah,
that. But Fiona did touch on the fact that as we get more and more extremes of weather, whether it's extreme cold or extreme heat, the fabric of the building, that exterior skin, is going to suffer. And particularly in older properties, we need to be sympathetic to that and work out how they can be properly maintained, and it didn't necessarily be hugely problematic, but a little often rather than waiting till it all goes wrong would be, I think, what they would suggest.
Thank you. I was just quite interested in Fiona, have you had any experience of sort of working with uh collective groups of buildings, like a street of the same type of building or something like that level yet? Obviously, I guess heritage buildings, it's not as common.
we are hoping to do a project with the cars officer where we're working with shop fronts, but it's still very new. But hopefully that kind of helps a street at a time, so to speak, where we're making shop fronts more energy efficient without disrupting too much of the character. We would like to be able to do larger areas, but we are restricted with just one person, and
Of course, yeah.
there's it's time kind of creeps up on you. But no, we are very much interested, and Frank's getting involved with communities and things like that. I think that's something that we would definitely be interested in touching on and working together, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and Frank, how did you find the process of getting your community interested in this retrofitting concept and, that development?
I think it's like all change programs that and we're still, albeit we've got this lovely foundation in the survey report, we're still in the early days. You have a few brave souls who are the innovators, and then you try
Mhm.
and reach out some more to get the early adopters, and then you try, so you got to move through that curve of adoption of something, and we're still at the very early stages. Having good case studies and again, I'll maybe catch up with Fiona and see what else she can share in terms of case studies are really important. If you're asking someone
Yeah,
to
it'd be
invest
great
in
if they all
something,
like him. I know.
then if we can say, look, this has happened, here's what they did, here's how much it cost them, here's what the output was, then that just gives people the confidence to move forward. And again, if we can do it on a community by community basis, then it's even more powerful as a case study if they know the building or know the people or know the family or whatever else. I also think, and this will probably be work for both a heritage perspective and a converted community perspective, if we can look at some of our public buildings. So a lot of the villages have village halls that date back a couple of 100 years to when there was some worthy who made it good and give the money back to build a village hall. So we've got some lovely village halls, but a lot of them aren't particularly energy efficient. So if we can work on those and work with organisations like Fiona's, with FBL, with the council, and work out what we can do, they can be poster children for the rest of the village to say,
Mhm.
well, actually, the village hall or the McClintock Hall or whatever else has reduced its energy bill by X%. It's also really, really important, and I'm slightly going off topic here, guys, but if we get our village halls right and get them with some solar panels and some air source heat pumps and other ways of warming themselves, they're going to be our emergency rest centres when we suddenly get hit by the next storm in the forest and people are being cut off by flooding or whatever else and need a respite centre. So that's an even stronger reason to make sure that we look after our village halls and make them safe and resilient.
Yeah, definitely. So they become your sort of resilient centers, but
Yeah.
also a learning opportunity too. So a bit of how that storytelling is captured, not just by dragging out the volunteer who's in charge of doing the retrofitting, but having that story shared in some
Yeah.
way. Well, thank you. Were there any other questions from people here? If not, I think we've quite neatly come to time, which is great. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for sharing all of that really helpful information, both of our kind speakers. It's been really fantastic. And the reason we record these is because the presentations and discussions are quite rich and niche sometimes too. So yeah, we'll have that up on our website very shortly in the news and blog section with links and things like that. Especially it would be great to get your presentation as well, Fiona, with the last slide in particular. That was super helpful. Thank you. So yeah, just a final plug for more sessions like this. They are designed to be listen in with your lunch type webinars. And we're also working with our food and growing team. So we have quite a few food and growing themed ones. The next one is bean growing. And that's on the 17th. But then following that, we're back to the sort of adaptation sessions, and we're looking at nature and biodiversity with citizen science focus, really, and looking at how communities and the public can get involved in that element. So look forward to that, and thank you everyone for your time today.